Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are back. It's Wednesday. This is New Comic Book Day Book Club, but actually it's Old Comic Book Day Book Club tonight. Welcome in, all of you folks. Hopefully you're having a good new comic book day. And we are here because we don't really want to talk about any new books today. We want to talk about an older book.
Which is great news because I bought a goose egg number of books today.
Really? You didn't buy any?
I bought 0 books.
Wow.
I bought 2 and I didn't like either one. So I'm happy to be talking about something other than the garbage books that dropped today.
What a coincidence. I didn't buy any today either.
If you all don't know, this is Sharon from the Life with Two YouTubers channel. And
she can also throw her voice.
Her daughter Rena is doing the same thing that mom does when Rena's on the screen, which is to hang off just outside the view spot there and make noise.
Yes. I do that to her every single week. I am obnoxious. So it is her turn for revenge.
And as always, you can look in the link in the description for this video and find the links to Alec's channel. So good morning, Alec, or good evening, or good night. And, hello to you, Sharon.
Hello.
Their channels are linked below, but I also included a very special link to the isleofthedark.com where you can order Rena's book, Isle of the Dark. One of the 2 YouTubers, Rena, has her first book being published. You can order one, support a young writer in the making, and that's an awesome thing you can do for her. So there. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the other YouTuber.
That's YouTuber number 2.
That's Vernon Black.
So yes, thank you.
Yeah, so you can find all those links down below, and definitely support all those people. I'm going to run through and say hello to the chat before we start getting into the book for tonight, which is Strangers in Paradise. Alec has been talking about this book to me since we started doing YouTube together, and I kept having to tell him I've never read it.
He said, that looks stupid.
Exactly how I said it. But I said it like stupid.
Yeah, John's much different off there. He's really mean to me.
I'm just an absolute beast. All right, so we got Immortal Biggie Shack was first, and of course, Chris Barrett's in the chat. Hello,
Stealing
Chris.
my line.
Thunderhouse Design, hello to you. And we had TJ, the Slab Dragon Watson, always supportive. Glad to have him. And there is Rena Random Wolf in the chat. Congrats to you, Rena, on your book. I can't wait to read mine. The real Dr. Venkman, who I've been watching more and more of on YouTube, and I've been seeing him pop on to all kinds of late night live streams. Really, really funny and clever guy. Glad to see you here. Joe Ruiz, good to see you. Oh, that is a cute little kid. Look at that.
Oh, hey, Joe.
That's a great picture. And there's a lurker in the chat. Hello, Perry. 12 Comic Talk. Good to see you. Let's see. Did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody. Ooh, lots of chatting going on here. Kachung, good to see you. I hope you and Delphi are having a good night. That is an awesome cosplay there as Black Manta. Digging it. Old Wolf Tony is in the chat. Hello, sir. Did I get everybody? Oh, nope, sorry. YouTube is 90. And there he is, the sock champion. Good to see you, sir. Gore Vidal, always dropping great comments. Very insightful gentleman, that Gore Vidal. And the Retro Savage. And I think now I've gotten everybody. Boom. Thank you all for coming. We are going to be talking about a comic book. Oops, sorry. Let me get rid of this. Oh, no, there's Perry. Go away. We're going to be talking about a comic book that some of you are either, from what I understand in the comic book community, either you're a huge fan because you've read it or you've never read this. There's really only the 2 groups that I'm aware of when it comes to this book. So this is Terry Moore's Strangers in Paradise. Alec, do you want to give us a synopsis for this series?
Sure. Well, so first, I had a bit of a problem this week because I couldn't decide how to read it. Because I could have read the issues, obviously. I could have read my soft cover, which is signed and sketched by Terry Moore.
Woo.
I could have read my hardcover. I could have read my omnibus.
Oh, jeez.
And I couldn't have read this because it's not actually in this, but I just wanted to show this off. It's a gallery edition.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So,
and then behind him, if you can see over his shoulder there, he's got slabbed copies of the first issue. Is that first and second print? Is that what those are?
That's
your head.
That's my head. That's the first issue of the miniseries, and that's a variant edition of the last issue of the final series.
Boom.
I'm sensing you might like this story a little.
No, people just like keep giving them to me, and I'm like, oh, this again. No, I love it. I think it's really great. So the synopsis of what we read, spoilers for those who have not read it. It's a story about these two women, Kachu, it's a nickname for Katina Chuvansky, and Francine Peters, and their friend David. And there's a bit of a love triangle thing going on. But it starts off with Kachu flying back from Canada after mysteriously taking a trip, and they didn't know where she went. It turns out one of her friends is dying from AIDS. And that friend, you find out that she made while working as a call girl years before she ever met Francine and David. And then the story evolves to you find out that she is in trouble with the kind of boss of this call girl consortium named Darcy Parker. And she
called the boss of a call girl consortium the pimp. Isn't that the?
Well, she makes it very clear she was not a prostitute.
The madam.
She might have been a madam. She might also be more than that. Spoiler alert. So she is after Kachu because she thinks she stole a bunch of money from her. So she has her followed first by a private investigator who loses her. So she sends her bodyguard lady, Tammy Baker, to beat her up and beat him up, and then she starts following her and everything goes to hell and someone gets shot, and then it's very dramatic and emotional. And may I ask you guys a question? Going into this blind, what did you expect from it, and was this what you expected?
I had no preconceived expectations. As a non-comic book reader, I just enjoyed the story. I thought it was a good story.
John?
I will say, so I had never read it, but I had seen the odd panel in an Instagram post or on YouTube. You know, I knew visually kind of the style, the touchstones for me going in were things like American Splendor or Ghost World, sort of indie drama comics that I had come into contact either through film or reading those graphic novels. So I was expecting something like Ghost World, and I got something very different. I think I was not expecting the violence. I was not expecting that sort of side of the story. I was definitely expecting I was expecting more of a comedy drama, and when that first moment of violence came in, I was like, whoa, that was not where I thought the story was going to go.
And he certainly draws it very intensely with a lot of
graphic
and spit and did you?
So for me, I mean, if you guys haven't, I mean, obviously I'm a film nerd, but if you haven't seen Ghost World or American Splendor, the films, those are films that are taking classic graphic novel stories by different artists and writers and trying to. It's not your normal superhero kind of comic stuff, right?
Harvey Pekar and Daniel
Pekar's American Splendor stuff is amazing and powerful and sometimes hilarious and usually very dark. But it's a look at his life and, his time having cancer or adopting his child or, the things that he went through. He just tried to chronicle it, and they made an amazing film out of that. And then Ghost World is a sort of oddball comedic look at two girls finishing high school and the way they interact with their small town. And both are great films, but that's what I was expecting. And
you're expecting more of a Ghost World.
The violence really just sucker punched me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of surprised by the whole crime side of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally was, because I had never heard anything about that being an element of the story.
Did that make it better or worse for you?
I love being surprised. I like it when a story goes somewhere that I didn't expect, but that totally works, you know? So I was perfectly happy to have those elements in the story surprise me. And I really enjoyed it. And it ended up reminding me more of, later on, more of like a female history of violence kind of thing. Like it was, you know,
Gorvdale dropped something in the chat.
he always does. He's always dropping good stuff. Going into it blindly, he says, I expected it to be a story about friendship, nothing more, but little did I know it would be a predecessor to modern TV like Breaking Bad. So I was just saying history of violence. It reminded me a little bit of that, whereas you have people with violence sort of around them and what they've dealt with in their past, and having that come back to haunt them in this sort of quiet neck of the world where they've been trying to escape it.
Right.
It is very much like two different stories initially, because you've got, you know, the drama that's going on with the girls and kind of like the little love triangle, and the violence is almost over here, and you don't really connect it until later and realize that it's all meshed together. But it's almost like two different stories going on at the same time, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, and to me, like, it's one of the reasons why I feel like it's kind of it has an air of realism to it, even though it's fantastical. But the fact that, like, it's not just one thing. Like, stuff is going on in their lives that has nothing to do with the major antagonist part of the story, and that part is still important to them because it's emotional and personal. But they're still dealing with, like, people coming after them, although Francine doesn't know that until almost the end of the book.
Yeah, she's pretty oblivious to a lot.
Yeah, she definitely lives in her own little world for a long time.
The world of milkshakes and
Yeah. But, like, honestly, like, you kind of, like, assume the best out of your friends and the people you care about. You wouldn't assume that, like, someone you care so much about is an ex-crime criminal who, like, she is described as having a FBI file as big as a phone book, and you'll find out why later if you keep reading the series, because she's, you know, there's more than call girl activity going on in the world of Darcy Parker.
So how many issues did the whole series end up running? Do you know?
So there's the 3-issue miniseries, and then there was 13 issues of the first series, and then 90 issues.
90?
90.
Wow.
So, and then they did
120 or 100.
Then he did Strange in Paradise 25, which was the kind of the sequel to it years later. And then now that he's doing 5 years, which is a tie-in to, like, all of his stories together into, like, one universe.
Like one connected universe. Gotcha.
Yeah.
How would you compare? So I listed a whole bunch of things that for me became touchstones, because you do that when you're reading something that's very unlike anything you've read before. You try to find, like, familiar ground as you're going through it. What were some of the touchstones for you, Alec, as far as, like, when you tell people, oh, it's kind of like, what are the touchstones for you when it comes to connecting Strangers in Paradise to either comics or entertainment in some way?
Yeah, I try to not, like, necessarily compare it to a specific show or comic or anything like that, because I feel like it's fairly unique in its own way. But I'll say, like, it's a love story, and it's a crime story, and it's a comedy, and it's a drama. And it's like, it's a lot of different things, but it doesn't ever sacrifice any one of those things for the other thing.
Agreed. Yeah.
Which, trying to balance, I mean, I always feel like some of my favorite films or stories are the ones that balance drama and comedy really well, because they're not an easy pairing, and you can definitely fall too heavy onto one side or the other. And that was one of the things I liked, was the tone of comedy and drama balancing here.
Yeah, he never Terry Moore never like puts in a comedy beat where there shouldn't be one. I feel like he saves those comedic moments for the more lighthearted scenes, and then when it's serious, he doesn't really like throw in some quippy remark that like takes you out of it.
Yeah, it's definitely not set up punchline kind of comedy at all. It's just the natural conversational sort. Sharon, were there any touchstones for you when you were reading this where you're like, oh, it kind of reminds me of this or that, or were there connective tissue for you?
No, not at all. They're all unique characters. I think the most normal character is, the boy who's kind of caught between the two of them.
David, yeah.
Yeah. And he is clearly in love with Kachu, but you can tell that he has fond feelings, for Francine too. And when it all culminates in the end, you find out that yes, he did really genuinely care for both of them. And that for me was really nice because you kind of wonder the whole time, is he genuine? Is he really genuine? And then you find out that he is, and you're like, yay. But no, there weren't any, oh, this is like La Femme Nikita, or there was nothing like that for me at all. They were all unique and really engaging characters for me.
You find out right towards the end of this first trade that David is Darcy's brother.
Right.
So the girls think that maybe he was sent there to like spy on them or be an inside man or something like that.
Yeah, so the villain, if you want to call her such, is this Darcy character, the madam, if you will. And
I think you can call her a villain.
Yeah, I don't know how far it goes and where she ends up, so I don't want to like pigeonhole her.
But in this trade at least.
At least, definitely. And so David is revealed to have far more than just goodwill going on in his motivations. I wanted to shout out Tank Collects because he's got those newborn babies at home and he took a little break from YouTube, and it's really nice to see you back in the chat, my brother. It is great having you here. And obviously we got other people in the chat. Alex Big Blue and Sam's Tangled Web and Hack is in the chat, and Mark Knapp is in the chat. Comic Otaku is in the chat. Southern Comic Geek. So thank you all for coming by. We really appreciate it. We're talking about Strangers in Paradise, specifically the trade known as I Dream of You. I'm going to just jump right into my like overall feelings as far as how I felt about it. I feel very strongly that the balance of the story is spot on, and it makes me want to read more of where this is going to go in future stories. I really, really appreciated that there were plenty of surprises that I didn't see coming, both artistically and from a plot standpoint. And I marked a few good ones that I was just like, that is fantastic. There's lots of moments where like, so this is Alec used his word bubble in our other show to point out a joke that happened in a sort of family gathering. And there's a sequence here, and I'll kind of make myself somewhat larger here. Family is hanging out. They're all having a conversation. And what I loved is this panel right here. Francie is sort of being taken apart by her dad, her mom, and her uncle, I think?
Yeah. Her uncle, her drunk uncle.
And it's all just sort of normal, entertaining, conversational stuff. And then you get to this panel where she's got a giant bullseye basically painted on top of her and the background. I freaking love it. The art just made me laugh here. Yeah. I got to this panel and I just started laughing, and I was like, what a great sort of bit of symbolism to put into that page. And it's the little touches like that all the way through that had me going. There were lots of little moments like that, like when Francie runs into her ex and he's got a fiance and she finally speaks for the first time, and it's like almost in emoji form. You have like, it says hi with like little smiley faces and little curly Q letters, and like she has her own like immature little font, right? Yeah. You can it almost makes this like a sound.
He does a lot of great stuff with the text in this book. He lets the text like really explain a lot of times how the characters are speaking. Like he writes in lowercase sometimes. He lets words trail off without spoiling where this is from. But there's a panel where it just says, "I love you, I love you, I love you," over and over again, and actually like is cut off from the bubble. There's text where like two people are talking, but someone else is screaming in the background. There's just like
there's like text all behind them.
So
when Francine is throwing her temper tantrum, and it's like all behind her. Yeah.
Also, Gray Matter Hulk said John is getting behind the White Whale selection. Yeah,
I saw that. I missed it. Sorry. Yes, I am. I was looking forward to reading something that was not a superhero comic. That was something different, and I kind of wanted. I made sure that I had time when there was no distractions and no kids to kind of just sit down and read it. And it was like it was long. In this version I've got here, it was like almost 200 pages or something. There's a lot to read, but I was really glad to have the opportunity, and I was glad that it didn't let me down.
Yeah, because that's a big commitment if it was a real stinker.
Well, I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
When you come to Mrs. Parker, you know, and she's kind of sprinkled throughout the book, and you had said earlier that you feel like she's the villain. I didn't feel like she was the villain at all. I feel like she's obsessed and or maybe in love with Kachu. And, you know, even up to the very end when she just lets her go. You know, so that was kind of the sense that I got. And I was just wondering if that was the sense that you guys got. She wasn't chasing Kachu for the money necessarily. I think she was chasing her because she was obsessed with, well, what about the roommate and what's going on with the roommate and what is she doing now? And you know, I didn't get the sense at all that it was about the money. Was I right about that?
Well, so she's certainly the antagonist.
Well,
Maybe.
Yes. I mean, she's the one who has everybody chasing after Kachu, but I didn't feel like her intentions were evil, like I'm going to kill you, you're going to die. I felt like it was more an obsession.
Well,
like,
I mean, I obviously know what happened, so maybe I'm not the best to.
Oh, okay.
So I was just typing in the chat that the name of the trade that we're starting with, and Alex said there's a mini series, and then this is the first real trade. It's called I Dream of You, and you can order it off Amazon. There's also lots of little compendium or versions, you know, that like Alex showed at the beginning of the show that you can get that include these storylines. But this is basically the first if you count the miniseries of 3 issues, it's basically the first 20 issues or so.
Yeah, I mean, you can skip the first 3 issues. I told John he could. They're a much different tone than this series, and they also they introduce you to the characters, but they don't really introduce you to the plot that much. But if you started with the 1 through 90 series, you'd be very lost without this one.
So on what Sharon was saying, as far as the villain's motivation or Miss Parker, yeah, I definitely got the feeling that she was a jilted romantic. That there was a jilted romance element to her actions. Now that could be a total misread on my part, but the way they described the fact that Kachu had 2 clients, and that the clients were likely both women, and the way that I keep forgetting Miss Parker's first name, Darcy, the way that Darcy sort of, I guess obsession is the best way to describe it. The way she obsesses over Kachu seems way more than just money. It seems there's a significant emotional component. If it's some other element, that could be true, but if it could definitely be romance at the first read through.
Well, and there's even the dream sequence that Kachu is having where, you know, she thinks that she wakes up and it's Mrs. Parker who's like, I'll be whoever you want me to be, in that brief blip, which for me was another thing, like maybe they had been together at some point.
Thank you for coming, though, Sam. I appreciate the support, even though you've never read it. So, obviously, Alec doesn't want to spoil anything for us.
I know he's quiet as a mouse.
No, he's not gonna spoil anything for us. I will say the way you're sitting and what are you wearing around your neck there? Is that a?
These are my headphones.
Okay, it looks you're looking like The Rock in that when he's got the turtleneck and the fanny pouch. It just looks a little bit the way you're sitting. That's what I'm seeing is a turtleneck. And I'm imagining a fanny pack.
The arms.
I mean, I wear a fanny pack at all times. You know that.
I know that.
Don't we all?
I'm assuming that if we were like way off the mark and reading something into this that's not there, you'd be like, "You guys are idiots."
Which I'm kind of waiting for him to say.
I'll just say, like, it is more complex than money.
Okay, good. That's what I was picking up.
Okay, so we're kind of heading down the right path, maybe a little bit.
He's like looking at the sun.
That's all you're gonna get from me.
And he's doing the smoldering look. Rena says that you've got the smoldering rock look down. So yeah, they're
Exactly.
So, Dr. V, I could definitely see people feeling like this is a snore, especially if they were expecting or were only used to reading superhero comics.
I didn't think so.
I went into this expecting it to be more of a drama, and I was surprised at how much action and how intense the story was. I mean, it's definitely a story centering around two women and relationships, but there's some crazy violence going on in this story, and it builds towards a sequence. And I'm going to reference History of Violence, the comic and the film, the same way, where the violence is sort of peppered through the first, 3/4 of the story, but then at the end you get hit with something big, and it's a powerful sequence.
And Gore Vidal, mentioned Breaking Bad earlier, and while I don't think it's like Breaking Bad, but I think it has tonally, like it feels like you're reading a TV show. It doesn't, like, if you want to read a comic that's like a comic book with superheroes and stuff like that, it's not going to be up your alley.
Yeah, don't read this. Yeah,
if you want just like a cool story that is layered and has more depth to it than a lot of superhero books.
Yeah,
I don't. Obviously, I love this book, so I'm going to be biased about it. But I don't think. I understand it's not for everybody, but I don't think in any way it's boring.
No, it wasn't at all. And I don't watch a lot of TV. So like when you reference a lot of the things you're referencing, like Breaking Bad, I've never seen it. So I have no frame of reference there. For me, it was just a really, really intriguing story. And I don't think you can really compare it to anything because it's its own unique world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of the bigger moments come towards the end where first one is when Francine is talking to Kachu, and Kachu kind of realizes who David is, and she's like, "You got to get out of the house." Like, for me, that was a very not like emotional in like a crying way, but like emotional, like gives you goosebumps, like, oh my God. Yeah, like what is happening? Like you feel the emotion. And again, it's a lot to do with like the way Terry Moore uses his lettering and stuff like that.
So you wouldn't see Sharon at all if she was in the bottom box. She'd be just covered by this. But
you could switch us.
You want to test it? I'd be like this thing.
I see this.
There you go. So, there you go. That's the creepy. There you go. He bridges the intellect and the emotion. That's a good way to describe it, Gore. And for those that are interested in indies, this is kind of like the ideal read, because you're getting a lot of the things that you would want from a good indie, which is story and character. I felt like Franny and Kachu were so well drawn. I could hear their voice. Like we've talked on other shows, on New Comic Book Day shows, where you read it and the characters sound all the same, or they sound bland. You can't get a personality from the read. And every single one of the characters in this, I could hear their voice. Like there was when a police officer came in, or when the crazy bodybuilder beat her up, bruiser chick.
Tambi.
What's her name?
Tambi.
Tambi.
Oh, there's actually two, Tambi and Bambi.
Yeah, they're twins, right?
The twins.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot that. The twins. So, yeah.
Something I was actually going to ask you both was, and it's something that struck me this read was how much improved his art gets from the first issue to the last issue.
At the very end, the big denouement scene where, Mrs. Parker and Kachu are looking at each other, the artwork is so intense, just the eyes. You just focus on the way that Kachu looks, and then Mrs. Parker follows the way her eyes are looking. And that for me was like a super intense scene because you're not really paying attention to anything else in the panels. At least I wasn't. It was all about their eyes. And I thought that whole part was so brilliant because Kachu is just telling so many stories just the way that her eyes are looking. So I definitely think that at the end, the artwork was phenomenal. Yes.
And if you look at later issues, like in the 80s and 90s, like he the way he draws towards the end of the series, like it's I think it's like remarkable to look at issue 1 of the miniseries compared to issue 90 and see the difference. Because if you look at something like Jeff Smith's Bone, which is another one of my favorite books of all time, it definitely improves, but not to the, like, he keeps it much more consistent.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat here. It's blasting by. I will say that even in this, I feel like there's a wonderful array of art in this. There's moments when it's a dream sequence and the artwork is just really abstract and wild and it really just really cool, and the detail work is just unreal. And there's other times when it's very cartoony.
It's like Disney-esque. There's a dream sequence that's very Disney-esque. Yes.
He actually did work for Disney for a short time.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, that makes sense.
And for those people asking in the chat about
this sequence here,
recommendations for indie reads, I have a really old video on my channel called My Top 10 Indie Reads.
And Geek just listed a whole bunch of great ones, and I was trying to tell him that Kanto has not dropped the trade yet, but that if you're looking for good indies to read, Geek has basically listed a whole bunch of phenomenal ones right there. I would throw Die in with that, and you've got a pretty solid list to get started.
Well, you know my feelings about Image and Indie.
Don't ever read them.
No, they're great, but Image is not.
Yeah. I don't care.
Where are my glasses? I need to push.
One thing that kind of I thought was weird was how in the end he switches from, having the story written in panel style to all of a sudden tons of script. And for me, that felt really rushed and hurried. And like the whole scene with the ex-boyfriend where he's meeting with the ex-boyfriend, that whole part for me was super lame and I didn't care. And it took up like a whole page of solid script. And it's just like, yeah, okay, she's great. She's wonderful. Who cares if you were in love with her? And who cares if you dumped her or she done it? For me personally, had nothing to do with the story at all, other than just to drive home, hey, Francie's great. Yay. I didn't really understand why that was even in there.
So they're Comic Geek says it's indie-ish, not Marvel or DC. I think that's a good way to put it. I agree that I feel like those big pages of like block text are kind of jarring, but at the same time, like, I will say that I would rather have that than like 3 issues of him telling that part of the story.
But why did that part of the story even have to be in there? I mean, like the whole hospital sequence. Okay, yeah, that all made sense where, the big body girl, goes in there to kill the private detective. That whole part I got. But the whole ex-boyfriend meeting with the ex-boyfriend.
Well, Freddie and Casey are throughout characters to the series.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like setting up stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I will say, like I was mentioning, that the artwork has several layers and styles, whether it's, there's a lot of dream sequences here and a lot of style to those, or when it goes to those violent sequences, which have usually a very a black sort of dark border to them, and you're getting some brutal. I don't want to give anything big away, but
This is a spoiler show. We can spoil it.
I'm pretty clear on it.
It's
Yeah,
been around for a while. There's nothing too new, I suppose. I just, what I liked about it was the variety of what it was putting out. And so when I got to those panels with the prose writing, like the big blocks of writing, I definitely was like, okay, I need to take a break before I read this. Like I like, okay, I get a drink of water, take a break. But at the same time, it fit for me just because everything was like that. Like there was no consistency. You would get a panel like this, which almost feels like, what was that? You know, like something I would read in the newspaper when I was a kid. There was like, oh, this is like the adult cartoon stuff. I don't want to read these, right? And then you get stuff like this where it's just the violence is intense. The panels are all like shattering or ripping and falling apart. And then you get dream sequences, and then you get these blocks of prose. Yeah. There was no consistency because, I appreciated that. It always kept me guessing.
I agree. There's no like consistency, but at the same time, it all feels like it belongs. Even the prose, where like maybe you don't care about it, it's not like it's like, okay, this isn't totally unexpected that he would do something like this, I guess.
I did find myself after I read the story, because I blew through the story really fast. I read it all in a couple of hours because I didn't want to put it down. And I did find myself, there's little stuff at the end where he has like a little panel that wasn't in the original story, and then he talks about like, what was he thinking when he wrote the story? Like what inspired him, the kind of music that he was listening to. And normally when I read a book, like it's almost like the acknowledgement page. You're like, who cares? Yeah. I read it all. And in fact, in the couple of pages in the beginning, the few words by way of introduction in the beginning, I was like, meh, don't care. I skipped over it and jumped straight to the story. But after I read the story, I went back and I reread everything, because you do get emotionally involved in the characters, and then you were like, well, okay, what inspired him, and oh, that's so interesting. And so that aspect for me was really, really interesting too, to learn more about the author and what inspired him. And one thing that particularly caught my attention was the fact that music really inspired him. And my little author, she constantly listens to music when she writes, so that for me was really engaging and really interesting.
Yeah. And there are 2 Bjork references. And there's also there's like a page of music, like written music.
Yes. And I wish that I was Javi and I could read what the music was. And I was actually thinking of him when I was looking at it. I was like, Javi would totally know what this tune was. I wanted to know what the tune was.
Terry Moore actually wrote that.
Have you ever like had it played, or do you know what the actual melody is?
He recorded it somewhere. I heard it at one point. He writes and like performs music as well. So
wow.
Yeah.
Gore Vidal is saying that he agrees with you. The entire series is consistently good until the end, which I don't know if he means the ending isn't good, or if he means through the end.
I think he means, yeah, because he says,
Sarah, he says
another unique work in a comic medium, great as it is, isn't able to do that. I mean, to be fair, that's also like way longer. It's like 300 something issues.
Yes, Pope C, we are talking Strangers in Paradise.
So I guess we should like spoil the big moment before we run out of time.
Go ahead.
So Darcy and Tamby, or rather Bambi, kidnap Francine when they find out like who she is, basically.
They try to use her as leverage.
Bait to get to Kachu.
Yeah.
And so Kachu gives in and goes and talks to them, and she frames Darcy's kind of right-hand woman into making her think that she stole the money. But then when she pulls a gun out, the cops are listening and they storm in, and a bunch of people get shot, including Kachu.
Yeah.
And then an issue ends with her dying.
And then you have another great dream sequence, right?
Now, obviously, reading a trade, you get to flip to the next page and find out what happened, but this book came out every 6 weeks.
Oh, that's mean. So for 6 weeks, everybody thought Kachu was dead. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so harsh.
And at this point, like, issue 1 of the 90 series was published by Image. And so I don't know if at this point that had been announced yet. So I don't remember if people like thought this could be the end of the series and maybe she's going to die. Spoiler alert, she doesn't.
Because this is only the 20th of like 100 issues.
Yeah. But like, did you at any point think that she was actually in danger?
No.
No.
Did that change the emotional punch of it?
No, not for me.
I don't think so. I was more interested in what all went down because you get a lot of gunfire, a lot of injury, who died, what happened.
So much going on.
I wanted to put the pieces back together and know what's going on. I was not worried about her death, but I was worried about what are the ramifications.
And I feel like the panic that he creates in the scenes following that, where they're trying to get her to the hospital, is so well done that to me, it like doesn't matter. I mean, it mattered. Obviously, she's going to live or die, but like that was the emotional punch. Like he did that so well that the fact that she lives like isn't not a letdown. Like you want her to live because she's a main character. But you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say? That makes sense.
No, it continues. It lets the drama breathe a little bit.
For me, I guess it was the part where I feel like Francine really honestly falls in love with her. I mean, they've been kind of dancing around it this whole time, but in that scene when she thinks that Kachu is dead, that she's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And that for me, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is the crux moment where she really, really realizes that, yes, she does love her. That was what that scene kind of represented for me.
Right. But then she even says to David at one point, like, yeah, of course I love her, but I don't know if I can love her in the way she needs me to.
But that was before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, because at one point she thinks she's in love with him. So she was kind of all over the board for a while, which why for me personally, that particular scene was where it kind of clicked in for her. And she was like, yes, I love you. And when the series ended, I kind of left hopeful that, yes, they do end up being together.
For me, like that was a powerful bit. I do agree. Like that, between the two of them, the bit that got me more, the relationship that I was most interested in, I felt most that had the most impact through the whole story was the relationship between, is it Emma and Kachu? Yeah. So Kachu's like best friend in this call girl scenario was another call girl that she was working with, and this friend of hers ends up, like Alec mentioned, dying of AIDS. But this woman always seemed like the shelter in the storm in Kachu's life. And so in her hazy fever death dream, she gets to sort of like revisit with her, and this sequence was powerful. This was great.
Yeah.
And she walks with her friend, and they get to like, there's a catharsis for the two of them, you know, because they both went through this really unbelievable situation, and to varying degrees are dealing with the scars of it.
And I think also the scene where she goes to visit her in the hospice and when she's dying is also like equally powerful.
I actually cried at that scene. I'm not going to lie.
Aha, I knew it.
It was really sad. And you're not even really emotionally invested yet in that. It was just such a powerful scene that you just feel really bad, you know, and that's before, because I actually reread the whole book again today. And that scene again was just like all the more gut-wrenching because you understand where their relationship was, and you understand the characters more. But even the first time I read it, it was like, oh man, this is really sad.
Kachu is remarkably intriguing as Natasha or Elektra in mainstream comics and in indies, Jaka from Cerebus, Valentina from Creepax, and Modestly Blaze in the comic strips. There's a few that I know in that list and a few that I don't.
Yeah, she is a much more in-depth character than you get to see here.
Well, and I was waiting for her to be a badass because they hint around at it. Like when the police officer is talking about how she had that same nose lock.
Right. So that actually happens in the first miniseries.
Oh, well, which they alluded to, but
Right.
you kind of get the feeling like she's equally tough as the big blonde bodybuilder chick. Like I was kind of waiting for them to have a little bit of a throwdown because you get the feeling like Kachu could totally handle herself.
Right. So in the first miniseries, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but she gets put in jail and gets kind of accosted by one of the guards, and she takes him down and does the nose thing, which is why that cop was like, I've seen this move before. Like, who else does like pull someone by their nose?
But he implies because she's so tiny that she was like super tough and super like powerful. So
He says like, oh, she took down a guy twice her size.
exactly. So you definitely get the impression like she's got some moves, which you look forward to seeing too later.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a version of this in color.
Yeah. So the first couple of image issues are in color.
For in the later run.
In the 1 through 90, so it starts off being published by Image and then it goes back to Abstract Studios. So a few issues are in color.
Interesting.
And do you like the color or do you prefer the black and white?
I prefer the black and white. I prefer black and white comics a lot of times because I feel like a lot of artists kind of I don't want to say don't put their all in because they but like a lot of colorists cover up a lot of things that pencilers or inkers should be doing because they know that the colorists are going to do it for them. Whereas I feel like when you look at pages like the one John showed with the guy getting beat up and all this stuff, like, that is so visceral in the way he drew it, and it's just black and white.
There's a scene where she wakes up and she's crying, and I'm flipping through to try and find it. But I mean, there's just so much raw emotion on her face, and I don't feel like it would have been the same if it had been in color. Just the way they drew her eyes, and you just see how like just sick with grief she is. And I can't find it, but I agree with you. I think this is much better in black and white.
Yeah, and
really
honestly,
good.
Like the way the colorist that he uses colored it, like I didn't think it like fit properly.
Really?
But
how many of us have tried to flush their alarm clock down the toilet the way she did? And I told John that, the very first panel where the stewardess is holding the barf bag, the very, very first panel, and it's like dripping and you just see that look on her face. It was like, wow, this is really realistic. The artwork was really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, so Sharon and I had we talk just like Alec and I pretty much every day. So she was sending me messages as she was reading, and I was like, okay, we're not spoiling anything, but we were talking like just a little comments here and there. And I looking back over it, I had written, she's like, what do you think so far? I was only like really right here at the beginning, and I said, it's honest and sad and funny and black and white. It's Alec as a comic book.
Wow.
True, he did.
I'll take it. I'll ask one last question. I mean, if you guys have more stuff to say, that's fine, but I'll ask one last question. Did I hype it up too much?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
No, I mean, obviously you've talked about it a bunch. I think for me, it was hyped up before I knew you. I had heard of it, and I knew that it was so highly regarded and that people that I respected cared a lot for it. So it was already hyped. But for me, again, I went into it with I've read some of American Splendor, and I've seen that film, and I've read the Ghost World, and I've seen that film, and for me, I thought that's the road I was going to be traveling down, and I definitely was hit by something very different. There are similar elements, I guess you could say, but definitely something different, and I liked that I was surprised.
I went in completely blind. I mean, in fact, you guys were so kind to let me choose which book to read. And I told John I was a big nerd and I went out and I bought all three. um, I had no preconceived notions or hype or anything. I had never even heard of it. So for me, it was truly lovely. And I mean, and I've read comic books before, obviously. And this was not a comic book. This was a story about they could be real people. It could be a very realistic story. There wasn't like a lot of fantastic. It was more human emotion and insecurity and, just a really nice story all the way around.
Yeah, which is why I tend to prefer indie books, because it's more about emotion than it is about punching and flying. But I mean, I like superhero stuff too, obviously. But
oh, me too, completely, absolutely. Batman's my guy, but no, it was really nice. It was like reading a regular book, which I'm an avid reader. So, I mean, this for me was just like getting lost in a really good book.
Yeah.
Well, and so for those in the chat, we had three indies that we were looking at, and from varying degrees of like traditional comic book to very much not a traditional comic book. This was Mouse, if you've never read it, was what I would say was on the far end of like heavy, not a traditional comic book. Then somewhere in the middle was probably Strangers in Paradise, maybe a little closer to Mouse. And then on the other side was Fables, which Alec and I are big fans of that as well. So we gave her a bit of a broad spectrum, and now she's
so nice. Thank you.
You got some good stuff to read. Hopefully you'll enjoy Fables as well.
So I know Sharon already kind of hinted at this, but John, are you going to continue reading it?
Yeah, I bought one of the pocketbook versions, which has a ton in it. So mine's almost 350 pages.
I was going to say yours looks different than mine does.
Yeah, I didn't want to stick you with extra reading that you didn't want to do.
I would have read it all. Yeah.
And I knew that I was going to want to give this a full shot, so I got the slightly longer edition. But there's like 6 or 7 of these, so I'm definitely going to be finishing this one, and then more than likely continuing on picking. They're out of print, so I think I might be going on eBay to be getting some of the other.
Oh, are they really?
You should check his website if you can't find them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, really? That's good to know. Good to know.
Let's see. So I'm assuming then, Alec, are you reading the current version? Because it looked like Pope C said issue 7 came out today.
Yep, I just didn't pick up myself. That's why I bought 0 books today.
Okay.
But yes, I own everything that he's done, basically. I even read his Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane. Yeah, I should, if you might have missed it at the beginning, Gore Vidal, but I showed off my omnibus at the beginning.
Yeah, see, I've never bought an omnibus because they're usually so dang expensive, Gore, that I'm always like, ugh, do I want to drop that much money on a read?
And I also have an original page of artwork and 2 or 3 sketches by him.
Wow, that's really cool. It's really nice that when you're truly passionate about somebody, you can find really, really neat stuff like that to collect.
Yeah, it was like, so I discovered it at my first like major Comic-Con that I went to back in Chicago, of all places, in the mid 90s. And it kind of like changed my mind as to what comics could be, I guess. Because, I read Valiant and Image and stuff, but back then even Image was just superhero stuff. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, well, what else can I find? And then I found stuff like Mouse, and I found stuff like Ghost World, and I found stuff like, Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest kid on earth, and Optic Nerve, and, all that mumbo jumbo.
Lots of stuff I've never heard of.
I didn't know a few of those too. So.
But you are well versed on the topic.
I have to be well versed in something. So I guess that's the one thing.
That's hilarious. So that's pretty much it for tonight. I want to let everybody get a little chance to tell us what's coming up on their channels. If you don't know Sharon from Life of Two YouTubers, I put the link for her channel down below. She's got 2 kids in her household that are YouTubers, Burning Block About 99 and R.A. Random Wolf hiding off to the side there. And in our chats, they've both been in our chats, so you can click on their links as well. And there is another link in my description below that says isleofthedark.com. And that's how you spell it, no capital letters.
Yay, thank you.
And you can go and read a little synopsis about Rena's book. And if you're interested, you can buy a copy of it. So please just take the time and read about it. You might find something that you're interested in, especially if you like fantasy books like Rena and I do. But Sharon's been doing Saturday shows, interviewing YouTubers in our community. And I believe, let's see, if I can remember who it is this weekend. Is it Comic Assassin?
Drew is going to be on this week. Yes. Talking about zoology. And we're super excited because he is going to tell us some life or death stories. And he works with all kinds of reptiles and birds. And so he's going to be talking to us about that. And then the week after that, we're going to have Roger Metarog on.
Oh, I love Roger.
And that is going to be Isle of the Rare. So we're going to be talking about rare things. And I am actually hosting that one, the rare thing where I'm going to be hosting. And Rena is going to be a guest. We're kind of turning things upside down there a little bit. And we're so excited to have Drew and Roger coming up. We're really excited. And then after that, we're going to have Simple Simon from Australia. He is joining us. For him, it's going to be Sunday afternoon when he joins us. So that's going to be super fun. We're really excited. Yeah.
So definitely sub up that channel and check out their Saturday interview series because it's been a lot of fun to watch and get to know some people that maybe you haven't seen their channels before. I know Sam Red and the boy who had 7. There's been a lot of really great people on there.
Caroline.
Somehow I made it on there as well.
You were our first guest, so thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah.
And the show survived it.
You are actually still our #1 viewed show. I mean, yeah, even our big reunion show from last week where we had like the big heavy hitters, you're still our #1 viewed show. So thank you.
Damn.
Funny, our highest viewed New Comic Book Day book club is one without John.
Probably, yeah.
I totally made that up. I don't know if that's true.
I don't even know. I don't know that I've ever sorted them. That would be hilarious if that's true.
Oh man, I could smell the burn from there.
I want that to be true so bad. So I guess Alec doesn't have anything to share. So thank you everybody for coming. I really do appreciate. No, I'm kidding. Alec, what do you got? Anything coming up? Anything? Nothing?
No.
You're so harsh.
I don't do a channel. I don't do stuff.
I do this show, and I do the Wednesday show in Comic Core, greatest comic book show ever. Which
was pretty funny tonight. So if you haven't checked it out over on the Comic Core channel, if you want just goofiness and nothing that's any importance at all, if you want some silly in your comic book YouTube time, that's the show for you. Next week, we are going to be back to new comic books, and a #1 is dropping that I'm very interested in because Al Ewing has been doing great work on Valkyrie, on Immortal Hulk, and he's now going to be doing the Guardians of the Galaxy. So next week, we have Guardians of the Galaxy issue 1, written by Al Ewing, and we're going to have potentially 2 awesome guests. I Got Issues. Chris will be joining us, and hopefully we get Jeffrey Comic-Con Henson, the Immortal Hulk fan of all fans, and another guest from the Life with Two YouTubers interview series. So we're hoping that Jeffrey's schedule, it's always a busy one, and that he's able to get his book, read it, and join us. That will be the plan for next Wednesday. Yes.
And interestingly, not the first time on this show that we've only been doing for a little over a year that we've read Guardians of the Galaxy #1. So tune in to see what I think about that.
Yeah, the first one with Donny Cates did not go over very well, yet somehow we also read issue 2. And now we're going to be trying a new issue 1 of Guardians of the Galaxy. Reboot.
Well, thank you for having me. It was so much fun. I was slightly terrified because I think this is my actual first guest appearance.
Well, you did Matt's 12 Days of Christmas.
I did. That's true. I was on Matt for Sam. Yeah, but I wasn't really the guest. I was more the emotional support for Sam.
Honestly, I feel like our YouTube comic community could definitely use more awesome ladies. And when reading a book that has two awesome ladies in the leads, what better than a lady's perspective?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a real honor. Thank you so much. And thank you for buying the book for me. And yeah, it's been fun.
You gift everybody. Somebody had to gift you something.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, everybody, you have a great new comic book day. Don't turn your back on the ocean. Isn't that what you say?
I said never turn your back on the ocean. Thanks for watching my channel, John.
Never don't turn your back on the ocean, everybody. Great night.
Bye.
Bye.